Hello, listeners. Tennis Weekly here with another breaking news podcast. Just like London buses, we didn't have one emergency podcast for a long, long time, and now we've had two in a row, and for good reason, because Carlos Alcaraz has come out today to say that he will be missing this year's Wimbledon. He will be missing Queen's Club as well. So effectively, he is missing the grass court season. His injury and time off the court goes on. The statement that he put out said, "My recovery is going well and I feel much better, but unfortunately, I'm still not ready to be able to play. And that's why I have to withdraw from the grass court swing at Queen's and Wimbledon. They are two really special tournaments for me, and I'll miss them a lot. We keep working to return as soon as possible." So this came out a few hours ago, and we are here at Tennis Weekly HQ, me and Chris, to dissect what this means. What does it mean for Carlos Alcaraz? What does it mean for Jannik Sinner? What does it mean for the state of tennis on the men's tour? There's lots and lots of different ways to look at it. But Chris, what was your initial reaction to this news? And is there anything you're taking from the statement that Carlos Alcaraz put out?
I mean, first reaction was very disappointed. I think you do really hope that Alcaraz will be on the grass. I think every tournament that he's in, you get a lot of value from it. I think fans love it. I think it's so good for the sport. I think it's such a shame when an injury like this does derail someone, especially at like such an unfortunate time when you think about it. You have just got big tournament after big tournament, slam after slam. And my biggest takeout is that he hasn't obviously said he's going to be playing the US Open or beyond that. I think we discussed that, Joel, didn't we? There's no return date. It's going well, but it's not going that well, would be my take
Yeah.
from that statement.
Yeah, for me, there's mixed messages going on here because he opens it very positive. My recovery is going well. But as you said, I was a little bit kind of confused because if it was going that well, then he would, in my head, be back for Wimbledon and Queens. He wouldn't be releasing a statement still 6 weeks away from Wimbledon saying that he is not going to partake in it. And as you said, the fact that he has kind of left it open ended, we keep working to return as soon as possible. Quite a vague statement there. So kind of no allusions to, the hard court swing, US Open. And it perhaps suggests to me how cautious perhaps they are being with his team are with this injury. We've spoken before about kind of how wrist injuries are very, very, very delicate things. You don't want to necessarily get wrong. You don't necessarily want to rush a comeback. Do you feel like that was probably part of the thinking with the fact that he's going to just miss the entire grass court swing?
I think it's got to be. And you look at some of the athletes who've had issues. I mean, tennis, you can't really run away from, wrist injury. It's so important to every single shot that you play. It's his dominant hand.
Mm.
It's also a case we've seen, the impact it's had on players' careers like Juan Martín del Potro, Dominic Thiem. And I mean, the good thing is that there was no tear in the tendon itself in the wrist. So that's something that hasn't changed. The nature of the injury hasn't changed. Normally it's 3 months. So I think it's a case where you don't know if that's based on the injury, if it's going to be on the lighter side of that, or if it could be further. So I don't think we're outside the realms of a normal recovery period. I think putting it out now is probably making it really clear to everybody that there's not that expectation. I think the media focus will go away from him now. He will be able to recover. They won't be trying to find out, is he going to play? He will get some peace in many respects. So I think it's to manage expectations and also to make sure that he doesn't come back too soon because, as I've said, we have seen some really bad injuries and risks are not to be messed with, that's for sure.
Is there a part of you that wonders if we're going to actually see Carlos Alcaraz return to the court this season?
I think I'm not too concerned at that front. Based on the 3 month window, it would be sort of late July. So I think probably Wimbledon was pushing it and he probably didn't want to go into it having not had a chance to build up to it properly, not playing a warm up tournament. Again, if you do play whilst there's still inflammation and you do end up tearing it, that's a huge block you'd miss as well. And it could just be completely debilitating for your entire career. So erring on the side of caution probably is the only way to look at this. And potentially, Joel, I mean, we were probably all too optimistic on timelines. I think anyone who has had a wrist injury, who's been doing the rounds of interviews, former players have said this is not going to be a quick recovery, and nor should it be. So I'm actually probably relieved with the time frame we're looking at now, and actually managing this is probably, being done right as opposed to, rushing things back. And we've seen, I mean, very different injury, but Holger, obviously, he's pushed back his return. And I think that's better than trying to, tempt fate and maybe cause yourself a much bigger injury.
I mean, it's funny you talk about, I feel like, fan optimism, and I do agree. I think a lot of us were hoping maybe Carlos Alcaraz will be back on tour literally as soon as possible, hoping to see him on the grass courts, because it has just been one-way Jannik Sinner traffic on the tour. What do you feel like? What do you feel like this? How do you feel like this leaves the state of men's tennis going forward? This extended Carlos Alcaraz absence. What does it? What does it say about the tour? I mean, can we expect Jannik Sinner just to continue dominating the tour? What does it say about their rivalry and the fact that we're just not going to get it for a little bit longer?
I think when you look at the nature of what's been happening on the tour, I mean, it is Jannik Sinner dominating everything. We've not really seen something quite like this, where there haven't been, other players who are in contention, really. I mean, he's lost a few sets here and there, but he's never looked like he was going to lose those matches. And I think it's going to be Jannik Sinner's to lose. I think it's a very different narrative to what we saw last year. Obviously, we had Grand Slam final after Grand Slam final to end the year, from the French Open onwards, featuring both of them. The Sinner-Alcaraz rivalry was the thing that was fueling men's tennis. I think we also have those moments where, Novak Djokovic steps up still, took out Jannik Sinner in the Australian Open. But right now, based on what we're seeing, I mean, it does just look like it's going to be an absolute, sort of whitewash for Jannik Sinner to win everything.
Does it change anything for Jannik Sinner? What if you were kind of in his shoes and read this statement? Does it change anything? Does it make the stakes higher? Because from my point of view, it feels like everything is Jannik Sinner's to gain at the moment. We've just spoken about him and his incredible Masters streak records. I've been, reading about, next up could be Novak Djokovic's 42 match kind of win streak in total. He could win all the Masters this season. He could win, the next few Grand Slams, obviously French Open, Wimbledon. What do you think it means for Jannik Sinner?
I think the nature of how he approaches things is going to be challenged, because you always are driven by having a rival. And I think they fueled each other's progress. And I think they almost are now practicing to beat each other. That's kind of the goal. Yeah. How can they get an edge? And now it's going to be about maintaining his body, maintaining his fitness. He's going to try and play all of the Masters this year, which he hasn't necessarily always done or been able to physically, survive the rigor of that. He's done a great job, winning the last 6 consecutively, so many matches. And I think it's going to be about keeping his body fit so that he can continue to do what he does best, which is beat pretty much everyone, pretty much all of the time. And I'm not sure what more he can really do apart from stay fit. And I think that's going to be key. I think in Grand Slams, we've seen those moments where maybe he hasn't always been feeling great. Medvedev at Wimbledon. We've seen, shakes in Australia a couple of years in a row. There have been wobbles. So I guess it's going to be mitigating those moments and making sure he's physically as fit as he can be, because, anyone else he's got the edge against.
Is there a worry that tennis on the ATP Tour is just going to become boring? I think there's already been a few murmurs of that, given the Sinner domination. If we expect that to continue, is that a worry, from the ATP kind of side of things? And I guess, you speak about the rivalry. Before this, we always were in like the era of the big three. I mean, even the big four. You could even argue with Wawrinka as well. There were lots of different combinations of matchups. So it felt like even if one of them or two of them weren't in a Grand Slam, there was still something to look forward to. But the fact that obviously this era at the very moment just feels like Sinner and Alcaraz, and we only have one of those, yeah, does it sort of change that kind of complexion that going into those Grand Slams? Yes, of course, we can look forward to the world number one in Jannik Sinner, but we don't arguably have a matchup that we can get super, super excited about like we would usually do with Sinner Alcaraz.
I mean, it's a great point that the big three benefit from being three. The fact that it was a three-way rivalry in that
Tour
respect.
benefits.
Well, everyone benefits because you also can spread them across different tournaments as well. You know, if we're looking at when players are playing, we've already seen they have skipped Masters, the two of them, which means that then someone else gets a look in. But if they're in the draw, they're going to win it. So the biggest difference, I think, is that I was looking at some of the stats, and actually the big three, only on one occasion did two of the three players miss a slam. And that was the 2020 US Open when Nadal didn't travel because of the COVID pandemic. And also, that was when Federer was out with a knee injury. But from Novak Djokovic's debut in 2005 to Federer's last Grand Slam match in 2021 at Wimbledon, there was only one occasion where there was only one of them. So it's kind of incredible. You look at these numbers and you think, well, we were so spoiled because it was so many great players. And I think that's what you need in sports. I think that's what raises the profile of the game. That's what keeps the interest there. I think seeing if someone's going to win it all, I think people have always said this. I personally wasn't bored when Federer was winning it all. I was a bit of a Federer fan back then. I think we could be in the same sort of place, you know, if someone is winning it all like Jannik Sinner is. It's very reminiscent of a period of domination, you know, where Djokovic has been doing it or Serena's been doing it, and people think, you know, this isn't necessarily the most entertaining because you kind of already know what's going to happen. And that's what's so exciting about sport, is that anything can happen. And we've got to remind ourselves anything, well, still can happen. It just doesn't look very likely.
Yeah, I mean, there is obviously, a top 10. There is Novak Djokovic. What do you think they will be making of this news? Because, the fact that Alcaraz is out of we know he's out of the French Open draw. He's going to be out of the Wimbledon draw as well. For players like Novak Djokovic, they're going to be thinking, I only need to go through. I say only.
Only, yeah.
Well, okay. It's more like for Djokovic, for example, he doesn't need to go through both of them. That has been a big story and narrative around, can he reach Grand Slam 25? What's the biggest obstacle in his way? Well, actually, there are two obstacles. It's likely going to be Sinner in a semi-final, Alcaraz in a final, or vice versa. Do you feel like Djokovic and kind of maybe perhaps other players in the top 10 are going to be motivated by the fact that potentially, even potentially, if they're in the other half of a Grand Slam draw to Sinner, it feels like it may be a bit of a free-for-all in terms of reaching a Grand Slam final. And if you get to that point, who knows what could happen?
Well, first in the Djokovic front, he's got two rolls of the dice to have probably his best shot at hitting. We
always say the best shot, but it does feel like, to me, it feels like specifically Wimbledon is the best last shot for him. Do you agree?
I don't think we can say last shot yet, because obviously he did make the final in Australia. He did take out Jannik Sinner, and he was up a set in that final. He's very much competitive. We can't take him out of that equation or say finally yet. But in terms of these two opportunities, it could be a case that Paris is very much him getting ready for that Wimbledon opportunity and kind of rediscovering his fitness. I think knowing Alcaraz won't be in the draw at Wimbledon probably is actually something. Again, he won't be relishing someone else's misfortune. That's not the sort of player that he is. But if you're looking at his own personal situation, it's something that is a more realistic target for him, given the fact he doesn't think he's peak fitness going into the French Open. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Novak Djokovic. I think we need Novak Djokovic at this time to produce fireworks, because otherwise the draw will suffer. We also really need Novak Djokovic not to be in the same half as Jannik Sinner.
Yes. I'm worried about that with the French Open coming up, because it can feel it's going to feel very, very top heavy if the draw gods are unfavorable.
They're not often
perhaps
on Novak Djokovic's side, I don't think. And he does draw Jannik Sinner quite a lot in the semi-finals, as obviously, you're going to draw one of them. And if you look at it from a scheduling perspective, we get some pretty interesting schedules at the French Open. I mean, Philippe Chatrier might be struggling. I mean, we might have to really lean on the French contingent to, fill the courts there and fill the stands, because I'm not saying that there's not enough interest in some of the lesser known players in the top 10, but those stories are nowhere near as developed. I think the fact that the rivalry has gone so big means that there is this opportunity, as you've said, for some players who don't get the media attention or the focus that Alcaraz and Sinner get. I mean, we've seen people leaving Nike pretty much because there's no space for them to be showcased in that sort of situation with their sponsor. So there's a huge opportunity for them to step up. I think it's something that I hope they will. But every time we've seen players in this situation, they've almost kind of crumbled at the pressure of the fact that there is this opportunity. Zverev is probably the most likely player potentially to benefit from this as well. He's had some tough matches against, in fact, he does better against Alcaraz than he does against Sinner. So for him, he's still got to beat Sinner, which is going to be a huge difficulty for him. But do you think that it's going to, we talk about the lack of interest it might cause potentially, but do you think that will be real, or do you think interest will remain the same because people support the players from their team? But there is something about the excitement of watching a Carlos Alcaraz match. Every round, you don't know what version or what magic he'll produce. With Jannik Sinner, I think Kim said it, some of his matches in early rounds do feel like there could be an email.
I know what you mean. I think with Sinner, there's more of a predictability there, and I think there would be some people out there who say, you see one Sinner match, you maybe see them all, particularly in early rounds of Grand Slams. I still do think, though, there is big interest. I wouldn't necessarily say the tour is boring. I think, certainly, I think a lot of the spotlight will be on Sinner, but I'm just fascinated to see how dominant he can be. And the longer this goes on, he has played a lot of tennis already, and I think the grass court season has the potential to be very unpredictable, because it's not like clay, where Sinner has played 3 Masters tournaments. He's got a lot of clay experience in him already this season going to Roland-Garros. For Wimbledon, he's not playing Halle, he's not playing any sort of lead up. He might play the odd exhibition at Hurlingham perhaps or whatever before taking the grass at Wimbledon. But we know, I think, how in historically, we've seen very unfamiliar names reach semi-finals and finals. Think about more recently, like Jerzy Janowicz, even against Andy Murray, Goran Ivanisevic, Mark Philippoussis, Pat Rafter, lots of different players that weren't necessarily at the very, very top of the ranking. So for me, I think Wimbledon has, in the men's championships, has the potential to be one of the most unpredictable, one of the most open in a long, long time, even with Jannik Sinner in the draw, just because he won't have played much going into it. Novak Djokovic probably won't have played much on the grass as well going into it. I think that could be really open. I think personally we could get a first-time Grand Slam champion at Wimbledon.
Oh, that's a big prediction. I was going to say, do we think that it's going to go Sinner's way, all of this? I think the more you spoke then, the more I think he's played so much tennis. Will it affect his French Open? I'm also thinking that could be true.
Well, you were looking at the temperatures the other day. They don't sound like temperatures Jannik Sinner wants to play.
Well, just because I'm preparing to go and I've got to get my linen out, Joel.
You got the factor 50.
Yeah, I've got factor 50. I'm going to have to get a portable fan. It's going to be extreme, and maybe he'll have to play a lot more night matches, because physically, as I've said, that will be the biggest test. Can he stay in top shape even in these sort of hot temperatures? He did struggle, obviously, in Australia. I guess the final sort of things I'd ask you around this will be, does Alcaraz have a problem with his game style that he needs to adapt because these injuries are coming in? I know this is a single injury that means he's missing 2 slams. It does mean that he will be missing 3 slams, I believe, of his first 23 potentially. Whereas, Novak Djokovic on the other side of things, it's quite something. He actually he played 51 consecutive slams from his Grand Slam debut, which is unbelievable. And he's only missed 3 slams in his entire career, which, those numbers truly are, they're beyond incredible when you think about it. And the longevity that he's able to, withstand really is something so impressive. The question I have, though, will be, the fact that he's missed slams for multiple different injuries. I mean, he had a hamstring injury at the 2023 Australian Open. He is quite early in his career in many ways, despite how much he's achieved. Is this kind of more in the world of, Nadal? And I mean, people do kind of get critical of us for making comparisons, but when people are doing such great things, you do look at their counterparts and what they have achieved. And Nadal did miss kind of 15 Grand Slam tournaments from his first major to his final major that he played. And that was for a multitude of different reasons. So is it the fact that Sinner, who hasn't missed any, is able to almost be more Djokovic-like in the way that he's able to be so efficient with his tennis? Is that something that this could lead to a bigger problem for Alcaraz if we assume he gets back to fitness, the wrist heals? Does he need to look a little bit about how he plays to manage his longevity in the same way we did kind of ask that question about Nadal?
I think so. I think we've already seen a little bit of that already this season from his team. I think, we've seen, particularly with the serve, how that has changed, from last season. And I feel like, with some of his shots, he's becoming perhaps a little bit more efficient. So it doesn't feel like it takes too much of a strain on his body. I do feel like maybe there are more adaptations to make. And perhaps he'll look at Jannik Sinner's game to think about, are there ways that I can, have an easier playing style, whilst playing, so I can minimize injury. I think for Sinner, it's more, we talk more about his body as opposed to his game being a hindrance, perhaps, going deep in 5 sets at Grand Slams, for example. I think for Alcaraz, certainly, I think it's more of the opposite. I think it's more his game style, as much as that we love to see it. It is
more physically taxing,
punishing.
Yeah,
exactly.
it does
and that's
really
always
feel like
inevitably going to lead to problems. And I think probably the most worrying thing is, as you mentioned, Chris, he's only 23 years old. He's in theory like a spring chicken. He's very fit. He should be able to maybe to cope with these things, perhaps, versus maybe getting a little bit older. So I think it's a great time now to maybe sort those things out and find a style that perhaps is a little bit more of a medium between the sort of heavy metal rock and roll approach I think that Alcaraz brings to the court, and the kind of more measured. There we go. I was going to say docile.
Robotic. We get in trouble for robotic. Yeah, it's actually a compliment, I believe, because if you can hit everything, really well,
but
that's
not
why
a bad
we love
thing at
that.
all. That's why we love the rivalry, though, because that is it's the opposite.
The yin
it's
to
the
each other's
contrast.
yang.
So
it is.
A part of me sort of doesn't want any sort of compromises to be made, but I think at the moment we just want to see Sinner versus Alcaraz on a tennis court. We got that so much in the in the Grand Slam finals last season.
But we talked about being spoilt for it. We said it's actually we're seeing too many clashes between them,
exactly.
And now I think we're made to eat those words, because that is not boring. We would have that in a heartbeat. And I mean, something to end on is that this is a huge loss for the fans of tennis. I think Carlos Alcaraz fans will really be suffering out there, and obviously we wish Carlos a speedy recovery. But his brand of tennis, as you've mentioned, is so fun to watch and brings so many people to watch the sport. So we just have to hope he gets back on a court soon so we can enjoy that again, and that it's not too soon.
Yes, we wish Carlos Alcaraz all the best. Chris, I will just say, Carlos Alcaraz, Jannik Sinner, they played each other 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times last season. We've had it once this season at Monte Carlo. It wasn't the best of matches. I think I was on record saying it was the worst match they played ever against each other because of the conditions. Final question. Do you think we will see Sinner Alcaraz on a tennis court this season again?
Yes, I do. I do think we will. It might not be as soon as we think. It might be in the Asian swing. I'm not sure. But I really do think that they will be. The challenge, I think, will be Alcaraz will probably be seeded very highly still, but he's got a lot of points to drop, actually. I hadn't even thought about that.
Yes.
It might not be in a final, but I think we will see it.
Final. Well, that would be maybe the biggest nightmare, is that they end up on the same draw. But as you mentioned, that is perhaps a silver lining for Alcaraz, is all the ranking points that he has. He won't be well, depending on when he does come back, he won't be dropping so far down the rankings that he will need to claw his way back. But we shall see. We do have the French Open coming up very, very soon. We will be back for our French Open draw preview episode with Jannik Sinner on Thursday.
With Jannik Sinner on the podcast.
Sorry. Well, with Jannik Sinner in the top
draw.
half.
Got it.
Top
yes.
half of the men's draw, yes. And we'll be looking at the women's draw as well. But we're going to end our breaking episode on.
I've got to hop on the Eurostar,
Alcaraz.
Joel. I've got to end it now.
You have got to get to Paris. But yeah, we're going to leave it there. Listeners, let us know what you think as well. What did you make of the announcement from Carlos Alcaraz that he's skipping the grass court season? Did we read not too much into it? Do let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts. But we're going to wrap up.
If you're a doctor, someone who knows more than we do, we'd also love to hear from you to see if we are, if we're misreading it in that sense. Yes.
But we are going to wrap it up here at Tennis Weekly HQ, and we hope you can join us for our French Open draw preview episode on Thursday.